I don't need to feel healthy drinking my sparkling water. I want my sparkling water to taste like Dr. Pepper, but not have the chemicals.
This is The Bandwagon, a podcast about baseball and being very, very tired in October. I am Hannah Keyser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Hold on, I had to get out ahead of this and be like, we're not going to spend the whole postseason bemoaning our travel and how late we were up, I promise. I thought about the fact that like you get one complaint and I'm burning it early. It's October 2nd and I'd like to complain
this
now
is
about
gonna be a bad decision for you.
tired I am. But I took a red eye back from Seattle where I went to find out what was going to happen in the AL West. And what I found out was that I was in the wrong place because I wrote this yesterday. There were 3 teams going into the final weekend in the AL West, the Astros, Rangers, and Mariners. And all 3 of them could end up in any 3 of the positions. In fact, going into the final 2 days of the season, all 3 of them could end up in any one of the positions that was winning the division, being one of the wild card teams, missing the postseason entirely. And what happened was the team that swept their series won the division, and that team was the Houston Astros, who I was not watching play baseball. Which is fine. I saw the Mariners very sadly come very close. And I saw the Rangers also sadly come close and have to settle for a wild card, which meant that they are also very tired today because they were also in Seattle yesterday and they had to get not just to the East Coast. I am in New York. They had to get to the East Coast and then all the way south to Tampa, where they will play the Rays starting tomorrow. That is my way of queuing up the fact that we are going to be talking about the Wild Card series, but not yet. First, we're going to do some banter. But we are going to be talking about the Wild Card series. We're gonna podcast enough this month that we don't need to go beyond that. We're not going to make any promises about previewing or reviewing every possible series, but we'll talk to you again before the division series, right?
If it's important, you will hear about it from us. Yes, you will hear from us again before anything important happens in the next round.
But before we do that, we have to close the door on the teams that are not going to be out in October. Not all of them, obviously, but just the ones that made news. This is not on our banter list, but I did text it to you. I would just like to say that I was very surprised to see that the Padres finished only 2 games back of a wild card and with the same record as the New York Yankees. That's all. They were not as bad.
Weird time.
They were not as bad. Like a weird kind of, if you Rip Van Winkled for 6 months and you just caught like preseason and right now you'd be like, oh, damn, they came so close. Look at that. Fell out right at the end, I guess. Nope, that's not at all what happened. They finished with a better record than the San Francisco Giants, which is maybe why the San Francisco Giants fired their manager. Gabe Kepler got fired with 3 games and 1 more season remaining on his contract. This felt like a huge surprise, but maybe that's only because it happened 3 days before the end of the season. Like, would you be surprised to know that the Giants didn't bring back Gabe Kepler, or were you just surprised that they fired him with 3 games left in the season?
Okay, I have takes about this.
Okay.
All right, so background information for people who don't follow the Giants closely. Farhan Zaidi, the president of baseball ops in San Francisco, came from the Dodgers. Gabe Kepler, who's been the manager under Farhan the entire time, really, also came from the Dodgers. And they pretty much operated this seemingly in lockstep. And the week before this happened, there was a lot of media coverage kind of questioning whether Farhan Zaidi's job was safe atop the Giants front office, and whether there were, changes needed, because the Giants were terrible in September. They really crumbled. They fell out of the postseason race and fell behind the Padres. Like, it was a bad month. But I was pretty surprised that, I will say, the team owner actually came out and said, we are not firing either of those guys, like 2 weeks before they fired one of those guys.
Yeah.
And here's my thing with firing Gabe Kepler. I have no idea if Gabe Kepler was like a good interpersonal manager. It seemed fine to me the times I saw this team in terms of clubhouse atmosphere, but it seems like he was fired for not having good players, and that's really the thing. The Giants don't have good players on the hitting side. They shouldn't have been close to the playoffs. They have no everyday stars. Zero. No one good enough to be an everyday star for any other team, and they don't use everyday stars. That's part of the frustration that fans had with Gabe Kepler, was that he was always running out platoons and switching guys out in between at bats. I saw a complaint in an Athletic column. Sorry, this is a very dumb complaint that was made, that he often took guys out after they had homered in their last at bat. He did it because they can't hit the other side pitcher. Like, he had to do this. He had misfit toys and a bunch of pieces that he had to fit together to make this roster at all competitive. The fact that he did, to me, says hire Gabe Kepler, maybe don't watch the Giants. Like,
right.
They need everyday stars, and until they get them, it doesn't matter who the heck the manager is. They're not going to be all that good.
Yes. It feels like we're already a couple days late to this analysis because we're just a couple days late to this news. And that analysis feels in some ways, not to say that it's not insightful. Great analysis. Thanks, Zach. But it feels sort of inescapable because, right, it's, yes, team disappointed. Who's at fault? Manager, GM, players, owners. Where's the sort of blame lie? And this feels like a particularly weird one to put at the foot of the manager, in part because 2 years ago, won 107 games in Manager of the Year with a team that was like not expected to do anything. And so the Giants' whole thing was like, maybe they will be greater than the sum of their parts. And in 2021, they were on an almost historic level. This year, maybe they were slightly less than the sum of their parts, but I don't even know if that's true. I think they were just
had two starting pitchers. They were better than the sum of their parts.
They were just the sum of their parts. Managers are really hard to assess. And yet this one feels uniquely like, you got to tell us what you thought he did wrong. If it's just like, we hoped they would be better, I'm like, well, I don't think that's Gabe Kepler's fault. Like, maybe he did something wrong. This is not to defend Gabe Kepler, but it's just like, I don't think that what Gabe Kepler did wrong was that the San Francisco Giants finished with a worse record than the San Diego Padres, in spite of the fact that at some points this season that would have seemed really crazy because the San Diego Padres have a lot better players. They have a lot better players. And so their players, they finish better. I mean, again, this is not to make every podcast about the San Diego Padres, but the San Diego Padres have a plus 104 run differential and the San Francisco Giants have a negative 45 run differential, and they finished with a pretty close record and only switched at the end. So they were obviously making more of what they had for a while there. There's been reporting, we'll have a whole offseason to get into, personnel rumors, but there's been some reporting that, in fact, San Diego Padres manager Bob Melvin might end up in San Francisco. He is good at making more of what he's got than the sum of their parts. That was a long-winded way of saying he was good in Oakland and not as good in San Diego. So sure, let's try that. All right. Also, Buck Showalter, he is no longer the manager of the New York Mets. He announced it, but it was not his decision before
the management made the decision.
Yeah, he announced it, but it was not his decision before the last game of the regular season, which honestly, not that this is the most interesting part of this to parse, but a decent way for that to go. He got to announce it. Everybody knew it was his last game. The players hugged him a lot, and then he was done. And we are recording immediately after having watched on TV the press conference to introduce David Stearns as the president of baseball operations, which the Mets did Monday morning or Monday at noon. We waited until after that to pod just in case he came out and said psych, Craig Counsell's coming with me and he's not even bothering to manage the Brewers the postseason. He didn't do that. In fact, he specifically was asked about manager and he was kind of like, oh, we're going to cast a wide net.
Well, he was asked if he had anyone in mind, which is, there are 18 different ways that this particular thing happened in the Steve Cohen, David Stearns press conference, but they can't say when they have someone in mind unless that someone is already unemployed or out of a contract with their current team. Yes. So here's a spoiler. Yes, he has someone in mind and he cannot talk about it, which is the same thing that was true of Steve Cohen for 4 years while he waited for David Stearns to become available. Anyway.
Yes, they not that again, it's we're not under cross-examination, but they had sort of interestingly conflicting stories in the fact that at some point Stearns was asked about like, when did it become like a possibility for you that you could like, run baseball operations for your childhood team? He was a Mets fan growing up, if you haven't heard that yet. And he was like, when I got the call from Steve Cohen offering me the job, because he knows what to say. And then later, Steve Cohen was like, I was at a baseball meetings. When did those happen? The offseason. He's like, and everybody was like, you got to hire Steve, or you got to hire David Stearns. Like, great guy for you to hire. And I was like, okay, that would have been a year ago. So they got their guy. The David Stearns thing, even though that is like the forward-looking news, whereas the Buck Showalter firing is the retroactive-looking news. We got a lot of time to talk about what David Stearns is going to do with the Mets. Did you think? Well, no. Let me pose this to you as an anecdote. I was in Seattle. I was watching the Texas Rangers play the Seattle Mariners, and right before the last game, all the games started at the same time on the last day. So right before the game in Seattle, it was also right before the game in New York, and I was in the Rangers dugout just chatting with Bruce Bochy, future Hall of Fame manager. And he said, like, what do you think is going to happen in New York? And I did not know the correct answer. But I said, I don't think Buck Showalter is coming back. And he was like, wow, really? And then we talked about that for a little bit. And then, like, we all looked at our phones after parting ways and found out that I had guessed correctly to convince Bruce Bochy that I am smart. I'm glad I didn't be like, oh, they're definitely going to keep him. And Bruce Bochy seemed somewhat surprised about this. This is not to say like Bruce Bochy's not in the know or whatever, but it is kind of interesting. The Bruce Bochy hiring and the Buck Showalter hiring were both a like, oh, you got to go with experience. You got to go with like someone people respect. And they were both made by teams that spent a lot of money. And they were like, oh, when you got all these new stars, you gotta have like a strong leader. And it's working out in Texas. Everybody loves to talk about how Bruce Bochy is keeping this team together. It worked out last year in New York and didn't work out this year in New York. Is that just the volatility of managers, or is there anything to that?
I don't know. I don't think that we're going to see another wave of like old experienced managers just for the sake of it. I think managers adapt. I don't think Buck or Bruce Bochy are behind the times or anything. They're still up with it. And in particular, those rosters, I think it mostly comes down to when you spend a lot of money, you're getting older players, and older players sometimes break. And that's pretty much, what happened with the Mets.
It's not what happened with the Rangers, though.
And they went from definitely winning the division to scraping into the playoffs, and they might go completely bust next year. Who knows? I think these teams are in different places. They made a similar managerial hire. I think the major thing you can take from the managerial hires in those cases is that both front offices are more scouting heavy than the average MLB team. They are decisions made by former players or a major personal scout type in Epler, Billy Epler, the Mets GM. And David Stearns is not that. David Stearns is looking for a front office translator. He said as much in this press conference that he views the manager in today's game as a partner with the front office who takes the point of the organization, takes the goals of the organization, and translates them into the field level clubhouse. The best one of those is the one he employed. He didn't even hire him. He never hired a manager in Milwaukee. He inherited Craig Counsell, and it worked really well. Kevin Cash is one of these. There are a lot of good managers who fit that mold. Buck Showalter is probably not, and he can be a really good manager without fitting the mold, but David Stearns is going to be under a lot of pressure to fix his childhood team and make them consistently good.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is out of bounds at all for him to say, I need to create the line of thinking that I want in the clubhouse. And it was not going to be Buck Showalter. It was going to be someone who he either has already worked with or someone who fits that mold directly. And, I think Buck could very easily go get another job if he wants to continue managing. Sounds like he probably does. So I don't think this is an indictment of Buck. I think it is David Stearns has a way he's going to run this team, and he needs a manager who fits that. And the previous hire was just completely at odds with his known philosophy.
Yes, I don't think this is an indictment of Buck. I do, however, think that it was to go back to that anecdote. When Bruce Bochy asked me what I thought was going to happen, I was like, oh man, I don't see how you can both change out the top executive, if only by bringing someone in over Epler, not actually replacing him, and have watched all of Buck Showalter's interactions with the media this year and not be like, well, why wouldn't we change out? Like, you know what I mean? It's like there's both a philosophical organizational change, like you said, and also it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of value, as far as I saw it, in maintaining like, well, at least there'll be some sort of like consistency in the messaging, because I think that had soured so much between last year and this year with Buck Showalter and the media. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it wasn't like he was bringing like at least like a calm, consistent face to these struggles in such a way that it was like, well, let's just keep him in place through the first year of David Stearns. Like, people want there to be change, is what I'm saying. Like, there's not like people are Mets fans and New York media are going to show up next year expecting for like things to be done differently because of how frustrating this season was on a lot of different levels. And, the same, I guess, could be said in San Diego, right? I mean, it's like, there's not like there's other than Steve Cohen, who manages to avoid criticism by spending a lot of money. I think Mets fans are ready for a change. Other than Steve Cohen and like Pete Alonso, Mets fans are like, what new do you have for me? And so that combined with bringing in a new executive felt like it spelled like, yeah, let's just turn the page as quickly as possible in New York.
Before we move on to previewing the postseason, the last three managers have lasted exactly 2 years, I believe, with the New York Mets. 2 seasons. I think Mickey Callaway got axed before the end. But over under 2.01 seasons for the next Mets manager.
I'm going to say over.
Okay.
I think Steve Cohen has set the expectations sufficiently reasonable such that all they have to do is make some progress, and they have the resources and enough in-house talent to make progress. How's that sound?
Good. I think the over 2, but I could revise it based on who gets hired.
Well, that's what we'll talk about in the offseason. First, we got to get through a month of playoff baseball. All right. So the Wild Card series, they all start tomorrow. There are
Tuesday.
4 of them. Tuesday. That's more helpful. They all start Tuesday. There are 4 of them. There are 12 teams. How does that work? Some teams have a bye. These are the teams that have a bye. We will not be talking about them this podcast. The Braves, the Dodgers, the Orioles, and the Astros. The Astros went from like, are they going to make the postseason to like, yeah, they're going to get a bye in one game, literally, which is just a weird. We got to look ahead, but what a weird last couple of days that was, because it felt like I don't even understand mathematically how that's possible. How did they go from the 5 seed to the 2 seed in a matter of hours? All right, where do you want to start?
I think we're gonna start with the Blue Jays and Twins. Let's talk about the Blue Jays and Twins. The series that technically pits a division winner against a wild card, but the wild card actually has, the better record. So that's good.
We previewed a lot of these teams already because they were already set. So rather than just go team by team, we're going to focus on the series themselves. And so you came up with a series motif for every series. Before you give it for this one, tell us what that is.
It's basically the alternative idea for this was come up with a college football rivalry name for these series to give you a sense of what they have in common, where they differ, what the overall vibe of this series is going to be. I didn't have good ideas for all of the college football ideas, so we went with this instead. And Here's the motif, I think, for the Blue Jays and Twins. It is, surprise, all of the best players are pitchers. These two teams looked like they, should have been offensive powered, I think, just from glancing. It's Carlos Correa's on the Twins now. They have Byron Buxton. They have all these kind of big number one overall former picks. The Blue Jays obviously have built a young core: Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, all of these guys. George Springer. Didn't work. The offenses were not that good. The starting rotations, awesome. The Twins have been powered by Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray. The Blue Jays have like 5 really good pitchers, most notably Kevin Gausman, Chris Bassett, and Jose Barrios, who's bounced back this year. So I think it's sort of a collision of these teams that would make a lot of sense if they were good at offense, but actually they've been very pitching based and sort of for weird, different reasons.
I feel like the Blue Jays, I didn't check this. Again, get pretty tired. Got in recently. Maybe you're the only playoff team that has more than 3 healthy starting pitchers that they like starting in baseball. Like they have like almost their full rotation. And you're right, it is a good rotation. That is very much the thing that these two teams have in common. Looking at just the broadest kind of like how Fangraphs ranks them based on WAR for starting pitching staffs, but both rotation and bullpen. Last year, the Blue Jays were 11th. The Twins were 20th. This year, the Twins are 4th and the Blue Jays are 5th. So yes, they are teams that like every year before this year, by every year before this year, I mean like the last 2 years, it seemed like they were trying to get into the postseason and get far into the postseason. The Blue Jays did get in with lineups that both of them were like, never mind, we got to focus on run prevention. And then now they're both better at pitching and defense. We should say that the Blue Jays actually took a really intentional approach to run prevention this offseason that was like overhauling their outfield defense. And that has also been really successful. That's very fun to watch. I think defense is such a fun element to bring to a postseason series because postseason series are unfortunately so often like the worst of baseball. There are a lot of pitching changes, pitching for strikeouts, swinging for home runs. It's like all of those stuff that they tried to fix in baseball is exemplified, the problems that is in the postseason. And so a team that makes cool defensive plays, that's something. They're not necessarily playing a team that's going to put the ball in play. So,
yeah, I was going to say, Kevin Kiermaier and Matt Chapman, awesome to watch if anyone hits it to them. Unclear if the Twins will do that.
Unclear if the Twins will do that. Yeah, this is like it is so strange to think that the Blue Jays and Twins could end up being the lowest scoring of these matchups. And spoiler, equally strange in some ways to think that the Rangers and Rays could end up being the highest scoring of these matchups. Who do you want to win and who do you think will win?
Okay, so let's talk about who you want to do who a neutral observer should root for in this?
Well, I do,
you have takes on that?
But I also want to know who you actually want. Like I care about your opinions. I want you to be happy.
So
who are your guys?
I have particular interest in the Yahoo Sports playoff preview that we published a little while ago. I picked the Blue Jays to make the World Series. For personal bragging rights, I'd like the Blue Jays to win. I think the answer is the Blue Jays. Look, I find the Blue Jays fun in that they could go full 2022 Phillies on this of actually all those guys who've been good every other year suddenly remembered how to play baseball again. It's not like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette have been terrible. They've just been below their usual selves. And if they have a good month that they are very capable of having, the Blue Jays are probably the best team in the AL if everything like shook out the way it was supposed to. And I think that could happen. I would find that fun to watch because I think they have a really great collection of defensive players and these offensive juggernauts if things go well. And I personally enjoy watching Kevin Gausman pitch a lot. So I'm in on that. I think their bullpen's going to be an adventure, and I don't actually feel that confident that they're going to beat the Twins, but I will take the Blue Jays for both.
I completely see what you're saying. I feel like if they beat the Twins, they're in the position of being like, sometimes it's good to have your position. This is the Phillies last year, is what you're saying. Sometimes it's good to have had your position players underperform all year, because then you're like, well, they should be better. And then if they are, you're like, and also we have very good pitching and defense. Yes, I think if they get past the Twins, they have a good chance. I feel like I'm not good at the who should a neutral observer root for. I'm rooting for the Twins. I like the Twins. I obviously I've talked about that before. I enjoy the Twins. I also find their pitching being so much better this year to be a fun story. They have really fun rookies. Royce Lewis, man, come on! Don't you want to see Royce Lewis, who has had so much disappointment in his professional baseball career thus far, have a blast and probably hit a grand slam at some point in the postseason?
I do. The Twins have not won a game since 2004 in the playoffs, and I would happily root for the Twins to win at least one to win exactly one game in this series, just to.
Oh, I kind of either want them to win. I either want them to win no games, and for us to just be like, well, we're just going to keep having to talk about that, or for them to advance. Like, I don't need them to win one game. What are they going to win one game, and then we're just back next year being like, does that count as progress? Who will actually win?
I think the Blue Jays.
Oh, I think the Twins. But perhaps we are both just reiterating who we want to win. I don't know. But who knows what's going to happen in a 3-game series? They're really random. It's really random.
They are really random. I think the Twins are going to strike out a lot, and the Blue Jays are going to win.
I think that the Blue Jays, like I said, the Blue Jays are one of the few teams that have a fairly healthy starting rotation at this point. That does them not as much good in a 3-game series as it would at any other point. So feel great about the Blue Jays if they can advance. It's a toss up at this point. And so maybe the Twins. All right. The Rangers versus Rays. The Rangers were playing on the last day of the season specifically to avoid having to be in this series, which is a series you would want to avoid. Like they were, so going into the last day of the season, the Rangers needed either to win a game or for the Astros to lose a game, or for both of those things to happen in order to win the division. Whoever didn't win the division would end up as the wild card team going to Tampa. Why do you want to avoid that? Because Tampa has won 99 games. They have the second most wins in the AL. By virtue of being in the East, they are not getting a bye, but they're a pretty formidable wild card team. The AL West, which was a very interesting race, Houston and Texas both ended up with 90 wins, and Houston held the tiebreaker, so they vault to the bye, and Rangers have to fly from Seattle all the way to Tampa to play the Rays tomorrow in a, like I said, surprising battle of the offenses. I mean, not on the Rangers side, pretty much just on the Rays side. But yeah, this could be the highest scoring. We should do that at the end. We should pick which series is going to be the highest scoring, which series is going to be the lowest series. First, give us your motif.
All the best pitchers are spectators. So the Rays are missing. Oh boy, this is depressing. Shane McClanahan, Jeffrey Springs, Drew Rasmussen. I'm probably missing someone. Everyone's hurt and out for the year hurt. That was the top of their rotation before. It's gone. The Rangers, famously, missing Jacob deGrom and now probably Max Scherzer. I don't think we have a final designation on Scherzer's status for the playoffs, but it doesn't sound good. So what you actually end up with, and I think this is why this series is so interesting, is kind of the second wave of pitchers that have to figure it out and go up against really good lineups on both sides. So the Rays, I actually think, have the edge in the pitching department. Tyler Glasnow is the best pitcher in this series on an inning for inning basis. Zach Eflin had a not great September, but he's a solid number 2. The Rangers have gotten really good starts from Jordan Montgomery since he came over in the trade deadline. He might have been the best trade deadline acquisition of the year.
Oh, certainly the most impactful now that they have no other pitching.
He has kept them afloat. Nathan Eovaldi is not a spectator, but he still looks hurt. Yeah. He has not been the same since coming back from injury. So that's a little dicey. And then the Rangers are just a big shrug emoji. I have no idea what they're going to do with the rest of the time. Their bullpen is a mess. It's just not good. The Rays bullpen is the Rays bullpen. It's still good and sort of like magic. Look, we made this guy good. There's a, just parade of dudes who throw nasty sliders who they will bring into the game to try to beat the Rangers. So that's the motif, is the lineups have the edge here because all the pitchers we thought were going to be pitching are hurt.
I saw Max Scherzer yesterday, and he said that he is feeling good throwing on flat ground, less good throwing off a mound. He was very emphatic. The slope affects things. I wonder if he would be better throwing off flat ground than some of their other options throwing off a mound. If they could arrange that might be helpful. I don't know what that amounts to in terms of his actual timeline. Probably not in this series. Probably not in the Wild Card series. Dane Dunning threw yesterday in that game that they needed to win, and he was pretty good. He's actually really good. He was coming out of the bullpen to do that. They were like, he's a guy who can go on short rest because he's had to go back and forth between the bullpen and the rotation a lot. So that is a strength in the postseason.
I would fully recommend people go look at Dane Dunning's game log, because it is like 0 runs, 6 innings, 9 runs, 2 innings, 0 runs, 5 innings, 7 runs, 1 1/3. It's just like he's like the even year Magic Giants of just amazing or absolutely terrible alternating. So if he was good yesterday, I recommend they not bring him into an important spot next game.
Yeah. They need to stick him in a sim game somewhere to let him work through some issues. Yeah. To be honest, this one feels actually easier for the neutral observer question. I kind of feel like neutral observers should root for the Rangers. The Rangers are like our last hope of baseball executives thinking that spending a lot of money is a good way to build a contending team. If you are a neutral observer of a team that you would like to see spend more money, maybe you're a Mariners fan, perhaps. You want the Rangers to be successful this year because they were of the top 3 payrolls. Oh, you'll hear it all off season. The top 3 payrolls, they missed October entirely. Payroll number 4, that's the Texas Rangers. And at some points this year, it looked like, wow, they are the best team. They're going to run away with the division that has the reigning reigning World Series champions, the Astros in it. They didn't do that. The bullpen really really did them in the end there. But I think is that right? That's the neutral observer rooting interest is you want that quick rebuild to remain a really viable option.
I think so. And it's just a different team involved. I think the Rangers lineup is really legitimately fun. They do a lot of things well. They hit for power and have some personality. I think Evan Carter, their rookie, is a really fun guy to follow, who we talked about when we bandwagoned them heading into the playoff race. So I think the Rangers is the right answer. I could see people getting really into the continued Randy Arozarena playoff spectacular. He is still the focal point of that team come October, and I think he will kind of expose some people by cult of personality to a lot of the young guys that they have now who maybe have taken a step forward since last postseason when they couldn't score at all. Isaac Paredes, the other Lowe, Josh Lowe, whose brother plays for the Rangers.
Right. The other series motif would have just been Battle of the Lows.
Yeah. The Low Bowl.
The low down.
The low down. Oh. One low will be down. One low will be up.
Yeah. I mean, right. The Rangers lineup is fun. Like if not for such an interesting NL MVP race, and if not for Shohei Ohtani having it like totally on lock in the AL, we might be talking about the fact that the top 2 position players in the American League, not named Shohei Ohtani, are Marcus Semien and Corey Seager by Fangraphs WAR. That's pretty cool. You've got the top 2 players in this one team. That's a fun lineup. They've also got like Adolis Garcia and, right, like you said, Evan Carter. Yeah, and now I'm just looking at like the Fangraphs leaderboard of American League position players, and of the top 6, only Marcus Semien and Corey Seager are in the postseason. So
Good.
if you're watching the American League side of the wild card or the bracket, and you're like, wow, I really want to see just like some star power in the lineup, you're gonna have to root for the Texas Rangers. Because it goes Shohei Ohtani, Marcus Semien, Corey Seager, Julio Rodriguez of the Seattle Mariners, Bobby Witt Jr. of the Kansas City Royals, Jose Ramirez of the Cleveland Guardians, and then Kyle Tucker of the Astros. So yeah, and the Astros, you don't want to root for them. So yeah, top 7, you just Texas, just Texas.
I will say that when the Rangers signed Corey Seager and Marcus Semien within like days of each other, everyone was sort of confused because it felt like buying 2 expensive shortstops on the heading toward the wrong side of 30. As it turns out, really diversified options. They do this in totally different ways. Marcus Semien plays every out of every game of every season like it's hot lava to take a day off. And he's just kind of like steady Eddie, decent defense at second, strong on base percentage, nothing too flashy. And Corey Seager's like, I play every third day, but I hit 3 home runs every time I'm on the field. So just a weird, Corey Seager really had an MVP case in another league of another year without Ohtani, playing like 125 games. I mean, he really was great when he played. So he'll be fun to watch on a big stage, and he's done this before with the Dodgers, but I think he will be another revelation for this team.
I'm going to do a really annoying thing. I'm going to insert a quick game into this podcast that we do not have time for. It'll be very, very short. I just decided to check because you brought it up. You brought up Marcus Semien playing every day. Marcus Semien does, in fact, play every day. He played 162 games this year. There are 3 other players in Major League Baseball who played 162 games this year. Can you name any of them? Just name one of them. Name one. We don't have time for all of them, but name one.
Someone on the Braves did it. Is it Matt Olson?
It is Matt Olson. Matt Olson played 162. There are 2 others. You want to take a stab? Just take a stab.
Are there any other Braves?
No.
Well, that's going to get harder.
I will give you a hint. Podcast producer John just texted or slacked me, and he got one of them right. Who does he root for?
Ooh, okay. Podcast producer John is a Padres fan, so
it's pretty surprising.
Did Juan Soto play every day?
Juan Soto did play every day. Yeah. Oh, man. People got to give Juan Soto a little more credit. People are out here being like, they got to trade him. He's what's wrong. He's pretty good. He played every day.
I have no idea who the other guy is.
You're not going to get the last one. It was Eugenio Suarez of the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah, good for him.
I know. All right. Who's going to win this series between the Rangers and the Rays?
I think the Rays are. I'm sorry to the Rangers. For like 5 months of the season, I think it would have been really fun, and the Rangers had a great case because of the top of their pitching. It's not looking great on the pitching front. It's just purely a coincidental, consequential injuries are bad pick. I think the Rays are stronger right now.
Totally. I agree. It would have been more fun. Like the Rangers bullpen being bad, that's on them. They built a bad bullpen. Sorry. But the starting pitching, if they had incredible starting pitching and then a super volatile bullpen, but then also like a lineup that mashes, that would have been a fun combo. And you'd be like, that go any other way or anyway. But like you got not enough starting pitching and a bullpen we should just put a little stat on it. They are the first team ever to make the postseason with more blown saves than saves. So they needed to have reliable starting pitching to have a shot. It's going to the Rays. All right. Next up, Marlins versus Phillies. This is where I will be tomorrow. Marlins at Philly. Marlins. Who saw that coming? Not me. I haven't paid attention to them. Who's on their team?
Well, Jake Berger and Josh Bell are on their team now, so
I did know that, actually.
Has been helpful.
Yes.
Beyond that, it's the Marlins, so there's still Jazz Chisholm, who's actually played pretty well down the stretch here. And there's a bunch of pitchers who are injured for them, too. Sandy Alcantara, last year's Cy Young pitcher winner in the NL, was not great this season, and as it turns out, he got hurt at the end. Yuri Perez, their phenomenal rookie, kind of took a downturn, and he was also hurt. So now they're both on the shelf. And so you're looking at Jesus Luzardo, Braxton Garrett, maybe Edward Cabrera. as the starting pitchers for the Marlins, which is not the list of names you associate. This is a weird team. I don't know what else to say. Like it makes no sense that they won this many games, and that's really fun for them. It's really fun for first year manager Skip Schumacher. I actually don't know which way you say that. Anyway, they have a lot of former Cardinals on their coaching staff, which maybe explains a lot. John Jay is the first base coach, I think. So this is a team that is punching above what looks to be its weight. Obviously, the one guy who's been very apparently amazing is Luis Ariz, the batting champion in the NL after winning the batting title in the AL last year. They're going to need to scrap together enough hits without hitting a bunch of bombs, because they really don't hit a lot of bombs. It's Jorge Soler, Josh Bell, Jake Berger, and if they can scratch it out, I don't know. I don't want to count them out yet. So this motif for this series is David versus the Goliath that thinks it's David. Because the Phillies have retained their underdogness, but it really doesn't make any sense.
I know. Phillies are out here being like, nobody believed in us. The reigning NL pennant winners. Yeah. This is to catch people up. If you only pay attention to one team, maybe you don't know this fact. The Miami Marlins have a negative 56 run differential. The Arizona Diamondbacks also have a negative run differential. It's much smaller. That's weird. There's only 2 teams in the postseason that have a negative run differential, and the Miami Marlins have the biggest. How'd that happen? They win a lot of 1-run games, and they lose a lot of not as close games. So like you said, I don't know how they're here, especially because of the pitching that you mentioned getting hurt. In the past, you and I have discussed the fact that someone should write about how it's more important to win the trade deadline than to win the offseason. This year, I feel like, other than the Jordan Montgomery trade, which you mentioned, the Rangers being really clutch, not a lot of teams that had like massively impactful trade deadlines change their fortunes, plug the holes that they needed to, and like went from middling to contenders in the same way that like the 2021 Braves did. The Miami Marlins, they might be that team this year. The Jake Berger, Josh Bell pickup at the deadline. That's some great GMing from Kim Ang right there. They did the thing they needed to do. They were like, you know what? We're having a surprising little run here on the combo of good pitching, winning close games, and Luis Ariz. They had almost no offense coming into the year. They still didn't have enough offense at that point. So they got some offense, and they got players who were not playing well for their current teams who have since played better for the Miami Marlins. So it's not like they made like a big splash. Cody Bellinger wasn't available, but they didn't get Cody Bellinger or whatever. They didn't mortgage the farm system for one bat in a year where they had a negative run differential, but they made smart moves that have paid off. I was stalling because I was trying to look this up. Josh Bell before the trade, 96 OPS plus, so below league average. Josh Bell after the trade, 119 OPS plus, so above league average. I'm gonna check Jake Berger now. Like they made smart pickups. They found the right pieces to plug in. Well, actually, Jake Berger was pretty good. 113 before the trade, OPS plus, 130 after the trade. So yeah, that was a good. So that's kind of like if they're not the 2021 Braves. Let's be clear, but like
they do have Jorge Soler. They do have Jorge Soler. That's who hit like 9 home runs in that postseason. So maybe he's going to do it again.
I did read your section of our preview that we had to do that mentioned that. You're like, why might they win? I don't know. Maybe Jorge Soler is just uniquely good in October. That would be fun. But let's be honest, everybody's rooting for the Phillies, right? It's not just because the Phillies are fun. The Phillies are fun. They were so much fun last year. And they are that team plus Trey Turner, who went on a very interesting emotional journey this year and is ending up in the right place, it seems. Nick Castellanos was better than he was last year. Bryce Harper was hurt and then not as good and now better. I don't know. They're fun. They're really fun.
I have fallen for the Phillies' weirdness. I mean, they are super weird in like a personality way of they are constantly encouraging young dudes to like unbutton their jerseys and do weird celebrations.
All right.
They they're so obsessed with the dancing on my own remix that they are using it for a second straight postseason. Garrett Stubbs always looks like he has just appeared to be the scene-stealing character in a sitcom. So I appreciate the Phillies, and most of all, I'm honestly rooting to see Phillies Braves, which is what would happen if they won this series. More so than I'm rooting against the Marlins, I'm rooting for high-level competition in the next round, and I think Phillies Braves is exactly what we want to see there.
Phillies fans' biggest concern, this is a little reporting brought to you by knowing some Phillies fans, is that Aaron Nola has been bad this year. Zach Wheeler has been good. They have more pitching than that, but like at the beginning of the year, you would have thought like, all right, going into, if they had to play another wild card series, they would feel good about having Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. Suddenly, people don't feel as good about having Aaron Nola, who's having a very ill-timed bad year because this is walk year. Not terrible. He's got a 4.46 ERA, a 4.03 FIP, but not Aaron Nola. So I don't know. That still seems like, it feels like we're looking for ways to say like this could go either way, but really, I'm sorry. It seems like the Marlins are just, this was a cute story and now it's ending. Look, someone's gonna play this clip. They're gonna print me out. They're gonna print out a GIF of me saying that.
I'm not saying that because the only 2 times the Marlins have made the playoffs in a full season, they have won the World Series. They do not mess around, and they made it in 2020, and even then they knocked out a seed they weren't supposed to beat. So I don't know. The Marlins could do it. I would not pick it myself.
Okay, but what you're saying is that not only could they beat the Phillies, but that they could beat the Braves. They could beat the Braves. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, anyone could do anything in October. This is sort of what we've learned. I find it very unlikely that the Marlins will get past the Braves, but I find it very unlikely they'd get past the Phillies, and it's not as unlikely as it feels. That's
fair. All right, we got one more series. Diamondbacks versus Brewers. Is anybody watching this series other than you? This is your favorite series.
It's not my favorite series because one of them has to lose, but these are probably my 2 favorite teams in the playoffs. Love both of these teams. This is the series, if you are interested in seeing like the new stolen base rules play out and the new way that like catchers are going to have to try to affect the game and on the bases. If you're interested in seeing a lot of really fast, good defense, this is your series. This is it. I mean, both of these teams have just an abundance of young, fast, interesting guys. And I actually think the motif that you're going to hear about the most on the broadcast is kind of the flip side of that. They're going to talk about the catcher trades from the offseason a lot. That's what's going to come up. The Brewers traded for William Contreras by like sneaking into the Sean Murphy trade that had nothing to do with them and coming out with the player who I think ended up having the best year out of anyone in that trade. Then the Diamondbacks made a challenge trade and got Gabriel Moreno from the Blue Jays for Dalton Varsho. I'd say both of those worked out great for these 2 teams. And I find it pretty interesting how successful those 2 catchers have been in this first year with the new rules. We're going to need more data to really back this up. But I think young, agile kind of throwing arms are going to be a really key part of this playoff run. But 2 of them are going to face each other in the first round.
You know, that's a pretty good sell. That's a good sell. Do you think that we're the only baseball site where every single national reporter wrote about William Contreras at least once?
I mean, you know, he was a good player on after an interesting trade, but yeah, probably.
I forgot that I wrote about William Contreras early on when they were having all the Wilson Contreras drama in St. Louis, and I wrote about the fact that both William and Wilson Contreras had been industry considered subpar defensive catchers before this season, and the Brewers had managed to successfully remake William Contreras into a really competent and successful defensive catcher. And so I spoke to their catching coordinator about that. Glad that held true because I did that early. Remember the Wilson Contreras drama? No, you don't. It was so early. And then you wrote about him later in the year when it was still true. This is a weird one for neutral observers because you're right. It's like either you're like, who, what? I don't know about these teams. Or you find them both sort of interesting potential underdogs. I think the D-backs are the more underdoggy, fun story underdog, as opposed to like the Brewers, who are just like a ruthless pitching making machine that doesn't score a ton but does play often in the postseason and not get super far.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to choose the D-backs for both the novelty and the fact that they have the best like avatar. I mean, Corbin Carroll is Mighty Mouse became a baseball player, and he plays for the Diamondbacks, and he's very, very good. He's going to win NL Rookie of the Year. He hits homers. He runs very fast. He creates absolute havoc on the base paths. I think he single-handedly killed the Giants season in the middle of September. He like stole 3 bases in a game, and they just couldn't throw anywhere near him, and he just kept running all the way around the bases till he scored. So that's the appeal. I think the Diamondbacks also have a chance to put Zach Gallen on a bigger stage than he has been on before, which is going to be great. I mean, he's a truly tremendous pitcher who, you know, like the Brewers pitchers, Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, Freddie Peralta, but those guys have been here before. You've seen it. And Gallen has a chance to kind of add his name to that list and show off in October. So it's probably the Diamondbacks. I also have a soft spot for the Brewers, but I'll agree with you that neutral observers are probably going to fall for Arizona.
Came so close to a D-backs Phillies wild card round, and then everyone was gearing up to do their Zach Gallen goes against his hometown team, which would have been fun. And it's gonna take some surprising results along the way for that to happen. But you could still be rooting for that as well. I was just scrolling through ESPN's preview of the whole postseason, and they kind of rank everyone's odds of advancing, and they had the D-backs as the lowest odds of advancing. So the real long shot in this wild card. I don't know that I necessarily would have guessed that. I mean, the Marlins have the second lowest odds of advancing, but the D-backs, maybe it's because the D-backs have Zach Gallen, who at some point looked like he would win the Cy Young, and last year sort of got down ballot Cy Young voting. And they have Corbin Carroll, who, like you said, is going to win Rookie of the Year. To me, they feel better. They feel like a better team than they are. They don't have a lot of depth, let's be honest.
They've struggled to maintain the consistency through the lineup the second half. Which is fine. This is a team that was probably on track to contend in 2024, and they just did it early, which is great. That's fun. They're playing with some house money. If these guys all get experience and they keep bringing up young guys, which they definitely still have some young guys to bring up, then this is maybe the first step in the Diamondbacks' journey toward being more surefire contenders. But yeah, they don't have quite as much happening in the lower part of the lineup in the middle of the bullpen as the Brewers do. Yeah,
remember like early mid-season when the D-backs were really good, the Reds were really good, and even the Pirates were really good. At the time, I felt like all of these teams are arriving early, and only the D-backs actually did. And that is largely because the Cubs
went boom.
It went. I stalled because I couldn't think of a non-vulgar way to say that. Like I was just like, what did they do? And I was like, well, they made a mess of everything. They made a big old mess. And then the D-backs got in. That is your wild card preview. I'll be in Philly. I'll be actually watching the Phillies Marlins, which means you will technically be watching all of the others. But is there one in particular?
I will do all the rest. Yes.
Is there one in particular that you are excited to watch? You're the Diamondbacks Brewers. I don't know why I asked. We already talked about that.
Yeah, I'm personally excited for Diamondbacks Brewers. If you had to like make me bet on which series I will end up writing the most about in the next 3 days, that's depressing. I think it'll be Blue Jays Twins. I think that might be the most interesting matchup.
Really? Okay, see, we differ there. I really do think Rangers Rays is going to be the most interesting, but maybe I am just like AL West pilled after having spent the last week.
I think you might be also Rays pilled. That's your series of things you're more interested in than the average bear.
I just think I got so interested in like, of all of these AL West teams, who's going to have to survive the wild card to have a chance. I just found it very interesting that it went like division winner, wild card, missed the postseason entirely for a couple of teams that are separated by like a game, 2 games, ultimately. So I'm interested in that series. And I haven't checked what time it's playing, but perhaps it's playing at a time that I'll be able to watch them because they stack these throughout the day. So there will be so much baseball on over the next couple of days. The rest of the postseason, they kind of space them out. Wild card, no. Just 3 days, 4 series every day.
Yep.
It's gonna be a lot.
Rays Rangers is in the 4:30 Eastern slot. So
okay. All right. I'm not going to watch
that. Second game in the pile.
And then we'll have a break between this and the division series in which we will pod again. That break will come Friday. So we'll be back on Friday to talk about what happened, who advanced, who's going to play all the teams that actually got buys. And yeah, that's all we got for you this week. Thanks to producer John for making this podcast look and sound great. Definitely follow us on the social media app we are still calling Twitter or Threads or Blue Sky or Instagram. I'll try to post more, like I said last week when I'm there. I didn't do that when I was in Seattle, but maybe I will this time. If you made it this far, subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend. We'll be back not next week, but in like 4 days with another episode of The Bandwagon.